I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona. Today we're in Gilmore Valley at the house of Richard and Rose Cowles. This home actually has quite an interesting history, as it was once a country schoolhouse for Winona School District. It closed as a school in 1968 and sat empty for a few years until the Cowles bought it and turned it into a lovely country home. Today we'll meet with Rose as she takes us on a tour of her home, and we'll talk with a former student to find out what it was like when she knew it as a schoolhouse. Gilmore Valley School began in the late 1800s as a typical one-story schoolhouse at the end of the valley. In 1899, Charles Burglar built a two-story farmhouse on the side of the bluff in Gilmore Valley with a beautiful front porch. For 16 years, two families lived in the home, but the valley at that time was becoming more and more populated, and the small schoolhouse was becoming inadequate. So Winona School District purchased the Burglar home, unfortunately tore off the lovely porch, added a stairway on the side of the home, and made it the Gilmore Valley Schoolhouse until 1968. Richard and Rose Cowles bought the schoolhouse several years later. Rose tells us about the purchase and the process of turning it back into a home.
We came to Winona in 1972 when my husband got a job at St. Mary's University, and he called me. We were living up in the Twin City area, and he called me to tell me about this place that he had found out in the country, and when he described it to me, I said, "Let's do it." You know, it was exactly what we wanted. We wanted to work on something and renovate a piece of property. It's peaceful and quiet, though, and now we have a heron that spits water in the back, so that's lovely. Rather peaceful to listen to that. We put the ponds in, of course, and we have the gazebo up on the hill, so we can go up there and view the whole yard from up above.
We're now sitting in the back of Rose Cowles' country home out here in Gilmore Valley. Hi, Rose.
Hi, Joyce.
Welcome to the Spirit of Winona.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Now, your house back here in Gilmore Valley is absolutely beautiful, especially your yard back here. This is so gorgeous. I don't imagine when you bought it back in 1972 it looked quite the same.
No, not quite. There was a lot of debris sitting here because the school had been closed for about 6 years before we moved into it. It had been taken over by wildlife, bats and rats, all kinds of creatures, and they didn't like to give it up very easily.
The school's back porch entrance was replaced by the Cowles. New footings were put in, and a brick patio was laid out next to the new back porch. The Cowles used the picture from 1899 to rebuild the front porch. They hired a crew of carpenters, showed them the picture, and together they recreated the same look of the original porch, including the design in the corner eave and the stick and ball bric-a-brac at the edge of the roofline.
I imagine the students came in the back entrance here because the back entrance led to a cloakroom, and there were hooks and everything, and there was even a water fountain in the floor, even though there was just a crawl space underneath it, and we converted that to our family room. Put in the barn boards and exposed the chimney. There are two chimneys on the house. We exposed the chimney that was behind a plaster wall and connected a Franklin stove to to that chimney and built the brick hearth and the wall behind it. It's been very fulfilling. I'm interested in country furniture and country antiques, and so this was a dream come true, really.
Well, I really like the style that you have in that room, the country barnwood, and I think that was probably a real typical look in the 70s.
Very typical, very typical. And we carried it through to the kitchen, too. We have barnboard cupboards in the kitchen, which Dick made also. Yeah.
You like country and you have a lot of collections of folk art. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about your interest in folk art.
I'm like a magnet, you might say. I'll buy one or two of something and all of a sudden, maybe a few more would be nice, and a few more, and all of a sudden you've got a collection. I've got probably 200 dog items. I have a lot of pictures and other things that are dog related. And there are a lot of dog things that are out there to buy. You kind of run out of space for things after a while. And so then you open up an antique shop.
Well, I know you're part of an antique shop. You run an antique
Yep.
shop, so you're sort of an antique expert.
Right.
Okay. I'm hoping that perhaps we can learn something about your antique knowledge. How about if we go inside and we take a look at some of your interesting collections in there?
Let's go.
Okay.
We passed through Rose's barnwood family room into a delightful country living room filled with Rose's antiques and her folk art. The room is divided into a sitting area and a dining area. From this space, we look back at the cozy sitting area and imagine a room full of students. In this very spot, children from Gilmore Valley gathered for 53 years to receive their elementary education.
We're standing now in Rose Cowell's living room, which actually once was one of the classrooms in the old schoolhouse. And Sherry Eddie Krueger has joined me today, and she's going to tell us what it was like to go to school here, because she went from kindergarten all the way to 6th grade in the schoolhouse.
That's right, Joyce, I did. And it was a lot of fun. Families from all up and down the valley were here. Actually, right where we're standing was the main classroom when the first school teacher was here, because she lived upstairs. And her name was Miss Straight, and she had been here quite a while. I think she was an elderly gal. The main teaching table was up in the front of this room, and all the classes sat in their respective rows behind me. When it was, say, the second graders' chance to come up and learn from the teacher, they would empty the row and come and sit around the teacher's table. Frankly, we all learned a lot by osmosis, because we heard all the lessons that were going on before us in the grades above or below. That is how the classroom itself was structured, with the rows. And there was a kindergarten room that was over here where Mrs. Cowell's kitchen now is. It did have a wider arch to the doorway, and it was a combination library as well. But that is where the kindergartners spread a little blanket down and napped during their rest period.
So kindergarten started out there in Rose Cowell's kitchen. Mm-hmm. And what grades were here?
1st through 6th grade, when I first started. So each one had their respective row. Then when I was in 3rd grade, the teacher retired that lived upstairs. And so they renovated the upstairs and took out the bedrooms and left one room for an office, and the rest was primarily one large room like this as a classroom. But there was also a back room, which then they moved the library to. So they kind of did a little juggling of sorts. And then the 3rd through 6th grade went upstairs, and the kindergarten through, 4th through 6th grade went upstairs, and the kindergarten through 3rd stayed down here.
How many students attended this school?
I think there was probably any given time 30 to 36, because there were 6 rows, 1 through 6th grade, and I don't think there were more than 6 to 8 in each row. The shorter row would get against the wall there, the window, because it wasn't as long of a row. You couldn't, But in the winter, of course, we would push all the desks to the sides of the room and square dance in the middle here.
Oh, fun.
Because it was a winter activity, and we would read Laura Ingalls Wilder books, and the teacher would read them to us at our lunch hour while we ate our lunch, or Nancy Drew or the Bowery Boys, things like that. But there's a room back there that was the coat room. So when you first came in, you would drop your coat on hooks back there, and it was so cold in the winter that we didn't need to put our milk in a refrigerator. We just left it sitting on the floor, and sometimes our sandwiches would even be frozen. I mean, it was just a very, very cold room. And, you know, upstairs, she had an office with a mimeograph machine, you know, because copying, there weren't Xerox copiers back then. And so if you were a teacher's pet, you got to go up and mimeograph off the number of copies needed for each grade. That was a big treat.
I bet you were up there a lot.
Oh, well, I was up there a fair amount, yeah, actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it sounds like you really had a fun time going to school here.
It was great. It was great. You know, they had a playground out here with a swing, and I'll never forget that a little boy that I liked at the time, I had my dress on, my favorite dress, and I went up the slide, and I was waving down at him. Well, as I took off to go down the slide, the hem of my skirt got stuck on a bolt at the top of the slide and launched me over, and there I was hanging with my skirt over my head, you know, from this slide, and my little boyfriend was down there laughing. You know, so there were all sorts of memories here.
Oh, yes, that's a good one.
Yeah, and the time my brothers made me lick the metal railing out there in the middle of February, you know that one. You know how that works.
Oh, yes. Someone came, I hope, and poured water on your tongue to let it free?
No, I think I ripped it off. Ooh. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. But such are the things that you do when you have to make your own, you know, fun.
That's true.
That's the way it was back then.
Have you remained friends with any of the students that you went to school with?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent.
In fact, some of them I graduated from high school with. My brother has maintained close friendships with them. In fact, many have talked about having a Gilmore Valley school reunion.
Oh, fun.
Because a lot of kids went here. And, you know, really, we're still all relatively close. When we see each other, it's not the, hi, how are you? It's the, hi, how are you? You know,
Excellent.
It's truly a bond. It's a bond.
What do you think, Sherry, was the difference about your country school here in Gilmore Valley compared to the schools that the kids were going to in town?
I think that one of the most different things is that we had a chance to be exposed to not just a different way of learning, but the outdoor environment as well. Cal Fremling, who still lives in Gilmore Valley, would come over and take us grade by grade up the hillside into the woods at springtime and show us all the spring flowers. We knew them all by name, by heart. You know, this is a fern, by the way, you can eat them, you know, that kind of thing. And so we learned a lot about the environment outside, too, as well as, of course, getting along with each other and learning in a school classroom. You know, I really think it gave a wonderful foundation for the rest of my learning years, if you will. I mean, even into college. I can honestly tell you, I don't think I studied that hard even in high school. I really don't. I think that a lot of it, whether it was geography or whether it was history or whatever it is, I swear, I think I learned it here. And it just all floods back to you. I mean, and I think that the kids that grew up in this school environment, they have more of an appreciation for, maybe I'm generalizing, but for outdoors, for getting along. It didn't matter if you lived on a farm or you lived in the country. You were all the same. You were in the same school environment. You were there to learn. It, at that time, was something that was expected. You know, you just came to school and you were polite and you knew your manners, and if you didn't, you got disciplined for it. And it was something we, I think, established early on.
Okay. Well, excellent. Thank you for sharing all those stories with us, Sherry.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, from the cloakroom now, we stepped into the living room, this beautiful country living room full of wonderful antiques. Rose, this is gorgeous, and I know this used to be the main classroom.
This was the main classroom.
Uh-huh. How did it look when you bought it in 72?
When we bought it, it had tile ceilings and tile on the floor and iron poles where we now have barn beams. We were fortunate to get these from a farm in Rolling Stone. And then we had to tear up the tile on the floor. We tore down the ceiling. I also stripped all the woodwork in here. I put shutters in because I'm not much of a curtain person. And then we sanded the floors.
And Rose, of course, you filled it with your wonderful, wonderful antiques. And I'm hoping you'll kind of share some of the antiques and what they mean to us. Like, for instance, this table. I have never seen a table with something an iron piece like that.
I've never seen another one like this. This came out of Cresco, Iowa, from an abstract office. It's made out of butternut, and it has an iron base, a tripoded iron base, and I think the date on there is October 27, 1874. And the whole table was like a Lazy Susan. The table would turn, and this was permanent. And of course, this could be adjusted back and forth. And there's also a hole here, which would have been a place to put a light source, like they would have had a kerosene lamp there for lighting it. It's been our dining room table ever since. So
great idea.
Yeah.
What about this piece back here? This looks like a real antique.
Yes, that is very old. That is a blanket chest, a 6-board blanket chest with green paint. It's called a penny rug, and that's kind of a folk, that for sure is a piece of folk art. They would use coins as templates to cut out these tongue-like pieces of fabric and then do a blanket stitch around them, and some of them are very elaborate.
Rose, what makes this piece so valuable?
The original height of the legs. It's got the original surface, original paint that hasn't been touched up.
How do you know the age of this piece?
Well, by the construction of it, it has square nails, which were 19th century instead of 20th century. It's dovetailed, and it's 6-board. It's a 6-board chest. This is one board, pretty big trees. And this is one board, instead of laminated.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And
What about this piece? Is this
that piece is also painted. It doesn't look like it's painted. It looks like a wood finish, but it actually is paint. I think it's probably Scandinavian, just because of the cutouts on the side are rather intricate.
Now all your dog collections here? Tell me about these little guys.
Each one has its own personality. I love their faces. This one is really kind of interesting. These little wooden wheels. And it was 10 cents when it still has the price tag on it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Rose, tell me about that interesting table over there by the window.
Well, that is made out of spools. That's considered a piece of folk art. They've made very intricate pieces of furniture out of various sizes of spools, all the way from little thread spools to big loom weaving type spools.
Rose, tell me what exactly folk art means.
Folk art mainly was for the common person.
Okay.
It wasn't done by someone who went to a art school or was trained to be an artist. They were pieces that were handmade at home, very unique pieces, and would have a special meaning to the person who made them.
Okay. Now you seem to especially identify with that. Why is that?
I don't know. I guess because they're very interesting, they're unique, they're one of a kind.
Now I notice especially you have quite a few samplers on your walls.
Oh, and samplers.
That would be folk art. Well, tell me what a sampler is.
A sampler normally was made by young girls. They're very intricate, and they usually had different stitches that they were learning to do. And they would do numbers and a verse, perhaps, and their name and the date. And here I was when I was in my 40s doing samplers. I have an appreciation for a young child doing it.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this piece over here in this corner. This is a very interesting corner. You've got lots of interesting antiques there.
This is one piece from my collection. I have several different pictures. I was in picture mode for a while. This is made by Roseville.
It's true country, isn't it?
It's true country. You bet.
Now, it's on top of what looks like, I think it's a dry sink.
It's a dry sink.
Tell us what a dry sink
probably
is,
late 19th century. A dry sink, it was used for washing dishes. You had a bucket or a wash basin, a wash pan, dish pan that you would set in here.
This has the painting that you were talking about.
I actually took the top layer of paint off to get down to this original surface.
Is a piece more valuable when it has the original paint on it?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Now, what about some of these interesting pictures? This is a beautiful
That's a
piece.
really heavy one. That's a piece of Bennington.
Oh, it even has a dog on the handle.
It has a dog handle. It's chasing a deer, actually.
What's the value of some of these pieces like this, for instance?
A couple $100 probably.
Rose, let's go into what used to be the kindergarten room
Okay.
and see your kitchen.
Okay, let's go.
This is a real country kitchen.
Right. The ceiling was in such bad shape because of all the walls that we tore out that we were so tired of tearing down plaster. We just decided to leave the ceiling open. My pot rack there is a corn planting wheel that the kids found out in a field across the road. And somehow or other we've got it hooked up there.
Well, tell me about this light fixture.
Okay.
What's the little bell on top for?
The little bell is called a smoke bell. This originally was an oil lamp. That smoke bell was to keep the black soot from getting on your ceiling.
Looks like you have two oak cupboards here.
Okay. Okay, this one looks like oak, but it really isn't. It is green painted to look like oak. It's probably, it looks like poplar to me, and it's done by hand. It's a special procedure where you use combs to remove a top layer over another layer so that you get the grain effect of the wood. And it's made to look like the top of this table, which is quarter-sawn oak.
It's like today's folk painting, isn't it?
Exactly.
Rose, what about this cupboard here? Now, this one does this have the grain painting as well?
It is oak. It's just the way the finish mellowed with age. Thought it matched the dry sink so well. Even though I prefer pine, I prefer country stuff, but it's still country though. It's still pretty country.
Rose, you did a beautiful job in here, and I love the way it goes outside to your patio.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
I like
let's head upstairs now and take
Okay.
a look at what used to be one giant classroom.
Okay. This first bedroom right at the top was an office and probably another bedroom for a practice teacher at some point.
Oh, you've got it filled with all your country folk art, I can see.
Right.
I love the quilt on there. Tell me about that quilt.
The name of that quilt pattern is Robbing Peter to Pay Paul. But you can see how you'll have white circles and blue circles.
Now you have another spool.
Another spool item over there, another little folk art piece. On the very top of that shelf is a popular print, the Lone Wolf it's called, but it's painted on bracket fungi. You use the materials that were available.
And then I see you have another six-sided trunk here.
Yes,
a
another
trunk.
blanket chest, a blue one. Of all the painted furniture, I would say blue is probably the most popular color that people want.
I love the old rocking chair. That must be very old.
It is.
And what about your bedraggled old teddy bears?
They're pretty precious because somebody really loved them a lot and couldn't bear to throw them away.
They are sweet. Well, let's look at what used to be the classroom. It looks like your master bedroom. It's very lovely.
This is the master bedroom. It was part of the classroom upstairs. You're looking at a cherry four-poster bed, mid-1800s.
Now I noticed you even carried your dog theme into your bedroom. I love
Right.
the old coat rack with the doggies on it. Is that an old one?
I would say probably from the 1920s or so.
Your whole house is full of folk art, isn't it?
It sure is.
One of Rose's most precious pieces of folk art is a lamp her father made out of moose antlers. The lamp sits on a dresser underneath an old painting of the famous Hinckley, Minnesota forest fire, which occurred September 1st, 1894, and destroyed the entire town of Hinckley, as well as 160,000 acres of forest. The room also has a log cabin quilt which covers an antique roped trundle bed. This room was part of the large upstairs classroom, and where Rose's hooked rug now hangs, there was a door leading to an outside stairway. At the opposite end of the upstairs is an original bedroom where the schoolmarm lived. Rose has put aside her folk art in this room and captured a more Victorian look. On the bed she has put a friendship quilt, which has signature stitchery radiating as flowers from flower baskets.
This is where the school marm lived, right?
Okay, and you put your special touches with your family photos. Now tell me about this one behind us.
Well, that's me when I was probably about 3 years old, I'm thinking, 3 or 4. That is my husband's grandmother, and that is my mother in that corner. My mother said they took this picture of me when I was running away with a pencil in my hand.
She has a little bit of a sneaky look on her face. Okay, well, Rose, I want to thank you so much for all your introductions of folk art for us, and also for the history of this wonderful old schoolhouse. It's been very fascinating.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for joining me today. Please join me again next week. Till then, enjoy the Spirit of Winona.